Welcome to Event Icons, everyone, where you get to chat with the icons of the event industry. I'm Lindsay Martin-Bilbrey with the Pathable Event Apps and Nifty Method, and joining me today is Alex Plaxen and our esteemed guest. Ooh, wait, we're gonna wait on that one. No, Jamie Murdock from Experient, so we're excited about it. Today we're gonna be talking about hackathons and how you can create beautiful chaos to create impactful conversations and engagement at your next event. So let's get to it.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #Event Icons. Presented by Endless Events. The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. Just go to www.event-icons.com to ask questions. Our iconic guests will answer them live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better the conversation. So please help share #Event Icons on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is #Event Icons.
All right. Well, Jamie, do you want me to go ahead and read your bio so that you sound fantastic and just really well introduced, or do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll just jump right into the questions?
I think I like what you read.
It's a good bio.
Yeah, or
what happens when you give them the ego push. But so Jamie Murdock,
Oh.
I really liked. It was fun when we were doing research on it. You're a vice president of sales at Experient, but I love that you describe yourself as a type A perfectionist, which means he might be one of the unlikeliest people you would think of to champion the practice of hackathons for events. However, with his varied backgrounds at companies like Disney and Tella, plus a self-imposed travel sabbatical for a full year where he traveled the world, he instead could be the best person to talk us through learning to let go and let it happen. So
yeah, the only thing is I did not travel a year. I wish I did.
How long was it?
3 months. No, not a year.
I don't know if that's less cool or still pretty admirable, the fact that you took away from your phone for a full 3 months.
That was, you can say that. It was the best thing ever. Talk about a hack, a life hack, just checking out. It was good.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a good starting point. You know, what did get you into the events industry? And if you weren't inside the events industry, what would you be doing?
That is a great question. It really started with the hotel business. And I'll never forget, in the 8th grade, I took a career aptitude test. And it came back hotel management. And we had to build our career in a box. And so I built a hotel room. And my parents are both teachers, and they're thinking, where's this going? And so I started researching universities, and I stumbled across Cornell, and I applied to several hotel schools, and I ended up choosing Cornell University in the hotel school, and it all snowballed from there. And I think it's in my blood, and I love it. But when I joined Gaylord, that's really where the events industry got into my blood, and I knew, that brand was built for meetings and conventions. And I knew then that I got the bug.
So if
and
you
now
weren't-
Experience. Pardon me,
if you weren't in the events industry, what would you be doing? Would you be?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're not one of those that fell into it randomly, like nearly.
I mean, 8th grade, like.
This was pretty calculated.
The hotel room, Jamie. That's insane.
Yeah. What would I be doing? Probably teaching. Yeah. My parents are both teachers. I love being, I love coaching. I love and maybe that's why I like facilitating the hackathon, because I get that teaching bug out of the way a little bit. So, and I love learning. So chalk it up to that.
I like it.
So let's talk a bit about that then. What exactly, for those who don't know, is a hackathon?
That's the same question I had. So let me take you back, and I got to give a lot of credit.
Have an answer. Oh God, guys.
No, I think it's a question worth asking, because a lot of people think it's just tech people designing software, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to give props to Donna with Retirepreneur. And it was back in December of, I think, 2016. She called me and she said, hey, PCMA wants to do a hackathon at Convening Leaders. And I said, Donna, that sounds great. I'm not your guy. I don't do coding. I know a little bit about technology to be dangerous, but I'm not your guy. And she said, no. What? Hear me out. Research what a hackathon is, and then let's apply it to the non-tech space. And so I started off on this journey, and I started looking at it in the traditional sense. And I think both of you have maybe been a part of one or know it. It's 24, 48 hours where technology enthusiasts or coders come together to form a team, oftentimes, and solve a problem. And it's a very intense 48 hours. And oftentimes there's a winner and there's a big prize at the end. So when I heard about this, I was like, okay, it's a lot of networking, it's problem solving, it's innovating. Take out the technology part, and I think we got a recipe for something that I'm attracted to. And so we started the journey, and I was like, okay, I'm in. Let's dive into this. And that's how it all started. Convening Leaders in Austin is the first one I was a part of. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. I mean, so you've run a few of these now, it sounds like, because you were telling us before we started filming that you've not just run it at Convening Leaders in Austin, you've done it at EduCon and then ASAE, and then you've even brought this into like the clients that you work with at Experient. So, what is the purpose of bringing them in? It sounds like we've got this great recipe, but why should we do these at events? What's the ROI?
I love that question, but I want to back up. And I've seen this starting to unfold as I start doing them. But when you think about a hackathon and what it does is it gives permission to members or employees or whoever the quote unquote hackers are to break things, to free think, to say what's on their mind. And I think that's oftentimes not a place where people are. They don't have that ability to go into work and break things. So when we started researching and talking to hackathon organizers, that was their motivation. They wanted to give, in this case, technology people, get out of your day-to-day coding and go to a place where think about the next big thing. Think about breaking whatever we're working on and making something better. And, as you think about organizations, they have to be fairly vulnerable because the hackers and the employees or the members are potentially going to share feedback that organizations need to hear, but that's how we get better. So that's oftentimes what people are looking for. They've got a challenge, they have to solve it, and sometimes the C-suite doesn't have the answers. Many times they don't, but people in the organization, bottom up, have questions, have answers, and this is a place to allow that freedom to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Especially in the events industry. I mean, I love that. That bold but simple statement of you have to have permission to break things, even just like we were talking about the prep, like the control nature, the type A perfectionist that we have to be inside the event professional world. Because if we don't take care of those details, the attendee experience suffers. The hotel room doesn't get booked. The venue doesn't work. I mean, there's so many missing pieces.
The anxiety.
Yeah, and it's something where I think as event professionals a lot, we struggle with the risk and reward and that innovation element. We want to innovate. We desperately desire it, but we're so afraid of the outcome sometimes because it's an unknown and we hate the unknown.
Right. And I think when we were interviewing one of the hackathon organizers, they shared that term with us, beautiful chaos. And that's what a hackathon is. You've got to let the chaos happen and be okay with it, because time is going to be off. Teams may not show up. Stuff is going to happen. And that's okay. You need to let that go.
Well, and that's one thing that I think is interesting about the hackathons that I've seen at events. And in fact, I think you've led some of them, is it's a choice for the attendee to participate, because these hackathons go on concurrently with sessions. So you're making a choice to, not go and potentially participate in the breakout sessions and participate in the hackathon instead, which is, as an attendee, something you're probably unfamiliar with and uncomfortable with.
Great point. But you think about, why do people go to events, right? They go for networking and they go for peer-to-peer learning. And oftentimes that doesn't happen at a breakout or a panel discussion. All of a sudden, a hackathon allows them to be part of a team, meet people that they maybe never would have met before, And we've, seen it happen time and time again. When we create these teams, we're very intentional about making sure that the teams are diverse and that people don't know each other. They're not from the same organization. If you're a supplier or planner or whatever, we make it so that that's part of the experience for them. So when you think about events and why people attend, a hackathon checks off several of the boxes. And the end result is they're innovating, but they also have new ideas and they have new friendships that are formed. And if you design it right and put it at the right place of the multi-day event, now they've got new friendships at the very beginning that are going to carry through the rest of the event.
I'm with you on it. You don't have to convince me, but for a lot of attendees, there is a convincing period where you have to convince them that this is something that's worthwhile for them to participate in, especially for those who think of a hackathon as something that's technology based.
That's a fair point. I think we did get some pushback at the beginning that a hackathon maybe has some negative connotation to it, or what not sure what this is, but I liked it because it sparked the question, what is that? And now all of a sudden we're starting to see the momentum. And I got a text today from somebody that said, okay, I'm convinced, I'm signing up for the hackathon in San Francisco at Convening Leaders. I'm leaving my comfort zone. And that made my day. This person normally probably wouldn't go and just be on her own. And I think she'll be surprised. I know she will.
So speaking of surprises, what have you seen specifically come out of some of the hackathons that you've run? What are some experiences when you're trying to help them through that period of uncomfortableness, saying, here's what we did the last time and here's what you could be experiencing?
Surprises. You never know what you're going to get. That is for sure.
Really helping my anxiety level. I like it.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if it's a surprise. From an event organizer standpoint, I think the biggest surprise is at the end when we're high-fiving, they finally see the value of what this has done. It has promoted the collaboration. It's gotten the members thinking about it. And we worked with one customer that they knew where they wanted the organization to go, but they didn't want to say it. So the hackathon was an instrument to spark the dialogue and get the community to be part of the conversation and provide some solutions that the organization knew were ultimately hopefully going to be the end result. And
can you facilitate it I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you facilitate it to accomplish those results? Or I thought that was the purpose of the hackathon, was to kind of like design thinking, right? And then what happens?
It was simultaneous. So we had to be careful, and you had to design the challenge to make sure that it didn't look totally pre-organized, but enough that, because oftentimes when you're in a community, people don't know what they don't know. They're stuck in a vacuum. They want to know what they know. And so all of a sudden they're in this place and it's okay, how do we break it? And they get uncomfortable. But then when we start getting them comfortable with the unknown, it starts to unravel and they land in a better spot. But I'll stop there. So
it sounds a lot like therapy.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit more, Alex? Session now?
But it does. I mean, you've got people who know things, but they don't want to admit that they know that that's the direction they need to go in. And it kind of helps facilitate those realizations, right? And I guess that takes us to the ROI. How do you measure the success of a hackathon?
I think every hackathon's got a different measure of success and ROI. It depends on what the organizer is really looking to accomplish. 9 times out of 10, it's an innovation, a new idea. I think for event strategists, we are looking to connect new people, to create those friendships, to create the networking and the peer-to-peer education. So a lot of times, I'll be transparent, we haven't come up with like this major, although PCMA EduCon, I think, had some great, we'll talk about that, ideas. But I think it's less about the ROI and more about the experience you're delivering for those attendees. And if the feedback that I'm getting along the way is positive and any indication that we are achieving that, I like to focus on that more than, as event strategist, more than the innovation. I think innovation is almost second to the experience that we're delivering to these attendees. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the process, right?
Yeah.
The process is number one, and the innovation is number two.
So, yeah. Process, but it's also some of the tools and some of the new skills that these hackers are going to walk away with. You know, at Convening Leaders, we had one participant that came up and she said to me, I have never spoken in front of a group that size before in my life. And her team nominated her to be the presenter of the solution. She was like, I never did that before. And now she was forced into it. I'm not sure where she would have gotten an experience like that if she hadn't joined like Toastmasters or something where she would have been actively seeking that out, but it just organically happened based on the dynamics of that team and them lifting her up and saying, hey, go and try this. So there's some individual development that's happening also. Mm-hmm. Lindsay, what?
No, it's okay. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you because I keep thinking of things as you're saying all of them. You just have so many good thoughts. So I was thinking, like, I'm thinking about it as the organization, right? I'm bringing it in, and because I have an unknown kind of roadmap in front of me, is there like a checklist of something, kind of going back to the ROI, because the process is the process, but I think we all know that many times when you're trying to convince the organization to try something new, especially that has other connotations in different places, when you're thinking about that return on investment from time and money, and even though you want them to trust the process because they don't have the right touch points for it, you know, is that something where you can say, well, these 5 things will definitely happen. It may not look like what you want it to look like all the time, but we can guarantee that you'll see empowerment of your staff or your membership. You can see this. I mean, are there elements like that as if you're trying to basically justify the hackathon experience, whether it's for events or event professionals using it inside there? Oh, he has materials.
Like that? Like the design playbook, I think we attempted to say, okay, to your point, we want to try this. What do we need to do to accomplish this? And what are some of those elements or variables you want to think about? So that's in the playbook, and they can find that on the Experient blog. That's there, but there are some elements that I think you're going to want to think about that we have found very powerful. And do you want me to share those now?
Yeah, I mean, we can go back because we've got all sorts of questions about PCMA, but like, I think this is an important element of the ROI conversation, because to even have the reference for some of the things for PCMA.
So maybe an ROI or conversation that's happening in organizations is not only do we have to create networking, but students, we want to get students involved, or we need a new sponsorship opportunity. So think about, and then there's the mentor conversation. The mentor conversation alone, I think, is something organizations should think about. So you've got the challenge, you bring all these people together. Now you need these subject matter experts or the safe place for these teams to go and seek out advice. Those mentor roles could be sponsors. They could be legends in the industry. They could be somebody that, who knows? But the mentors have been an incredible value add, an important part of the design of the hackathon. And I didn't realize it until Cleveland, EduCon, certainly in Pittsburgh, and then most recently at EduCon in Los Angeles. The part about students and thinking about that, we worked with another organization that brought in students, and students were placed strategically on teams. Where could a student then be immersed into an industry and be with all different types of people from that industry? But what else a student does is it brings a totally new perspective. And I call it a wild card, right? You have all these people that are in the industry. I've got a lot of tenure. All of a sudden, here comes a student. And what does a student do? They're going to ask the more provocative questions. They're going to be naive. They're going to be thinking about, I know nothing about this problem. And we encourage them to be that wild card or naive expert. So there's a couple things as event strategists, you're probably tasked, how do I get more students involved? How do I get sponsors more involved? There's a couple roles within the hackathon that can help you accomplish that. Does that help?
Yeah,
Add?
it does. Thank you.
Confuse? Okay.
No.
No,
Good.
I mean, I fell into the industry as a grad student at George Washington University studying event meeting management, and that was something I thrived for, was that opportunity. I saw my MBA friends in the business school doing case studies, and they'd spend 48 hours doing it and creating a solution, and it was a competition. It was a case competition. It was like, where's the event industry case competition? You know,
Right.
so,
This would have been perfect.
right. So
Maybe I should talk to George Washington.
So they do it for their MBAs every year. They do a case competition. So the idea of, and I've seen the results that have come out of that, because I planned those events for those students, and so I was looking always for something of that opportunity. So I've seen the results and how that can benefit. So it's interesting mixing the students with professionals, because that's not something that they do.
And
I love that idea.
Lindsay, what was that?
No, go ahead and finish your statement.
No, I have nothing. I have a lot, but nothing more to add to that.
I was just going to say, as a senior planner too, it's a nice, almost gentler way of challenging some of the status quo. I know that's always one of my biggest frustrations sometimes when I go to industry events. I mean, we go to a lot of conferences anyways, but I've been going to PCMA for 10 plus years now. Same things for most of the ones inside the industry. And it gets to a point for some of the breakouts where you almost have to have something else that jars you out of your circles. And we don't always hear it well, those of us that have been in here for a long time, because we are set in our ways. And so having those students there, I think, is not just a great way to help the students grow, but also an opportunity to, whether you're mentoring or not, go that nudge you sometimes need.
This organization used the students as a wild card. I would encourage organizations, maybe you don't have a student population or something, but outside thinkers, and strategically place them in the teams that are going to still be maybe somewhat knowledgeable about the challenge, but that naive, like, they're going to ask the questions that the rest of the team maybe don't want to ask, or fearful, or, oh, we can't go there.
Right.
The big takeaway is, as you're forming the teams, be very intentional about the diversity of that team, and make sure that there's some, not only where they're coming from, but they're not going to be fearful of asking some of those questions. The other, so I want to talk a little bit about LA and EduCon. So with PCMA, we pivoted this past in EduCon, and we wanted to really focus on homelessness. And Donna Kastner in Pittsburgh facilitated that social injustice panel where we talked about human trafficking and homelessness. And there was such this major response to that. Like, what can we do as a community for this? And so the hackathon was tapped to say, okay, how does the hospitality industry reduce or prevent homelessness? And at first, the verb was solve. And it gave Donna and I a bunch of anxiety. Like, we're not going to solve homelessness in 4 hours. And if we do, next up is climate change. So we're all set. But we changed the verbs. But what we quickly realized as facilitators is we couldn't be the experts, but the value of these mentors that we brought in. So Isla from Back on Your Feet LA, and Josh Dean from Human NYC, and William Thompson from Spain, who did his own hackathon on homelessness in his home country. And then my friend Michelle Crames, who's a serial entrepreneur in LA, but also very involved with the homeless issue in LA. These individuals added so much, because there was so many questions around the perception of homeless and what do we do with it. They were such a valuable, and these mentors rotated throughout the 5 teams and provided such great insight and thoughts and stats, and corrected, impressions that maybe were false. But it was a safe place to go. And the conversations that came about as a result were really amazing. So the mentor piece is something I think if you take away anything and you're thinking about doing this, really give some thought to who can be a good mentor for the teams, specifically to the challenge you're trying to solve. Is that
I think that's interesting that you tackled homelessness, especially with I used to live in San Francisco, and that's where we're going next for convening leaders, and they have a very big homeless, issue there. So I love that you're almost making it localized a bit with kind of where PCMA is going. So taking that challenge.
And it's not just LA and San Francisco. I think this is a national, worldwide issue, and DMOs were a big part of the makeup of the hackers, which led us to believe like this is a problem across the states, and everybody wants to have some type of solution to help combat this, or what can we do to help?
Well, aside from the fact that you don't want people to not have homes and all of the cultural and society problems that come from that. Like San Francisco is an excellent example of how it could impact the tourist industry. You literally walk out of that big Marriott marquee and you run right into the Tenderloin, and Moscone, everything around it. So when you're selling a city and when you're kind of bringing that in, it's tough to talk about this great attendee experience that in many ways can appear to be built on excess and all of the things that come in from having enough money to not just survive, but attend events, right? And produce the events. And sometimes the waste that can come from events, although we're trying to get better about it. And then to have that confrontation, I'm excited that the DMOs are really being part of that conversation and actually working towards it, because, it's something that affects the livelihood in addition to needing to solve this terrible cultural issue.
And props to PCMA for tackling it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I found out this week, they have a team that's going to be taking the solutions and are committed to, and that's an important part of a hackathon. You spend all this time, you're hacking, you're thinking about the solutions, but if there's no follow-up on what the solutions are and the pull through, you're going to lose the momentum and the traction and frankly, integrity of the event. So you want to make sure that whoever the owner is, that the solutions that are brought up or come up or winning, whatever, that there's some type of follow-up, and PCMA is committed to doing that. And they have a whole team ready to tackle it and say, okay, here's what's next.
I love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Maybe we take it back to something slightly lighter, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Back, still talking about PCMA, though, and the great work. One of the things that I really liked about the PCMA event, I know you've made some tweaks, but is the question burst section, because by it. So tell us a little bit more about what is the question burst area.
Thank you for asking that. Yeah, I stumbled across this from a great friend of mine through a Harvard Business Review article about questions are the answer, and Hal Gregerson came up with this question burst idea. And it's funny, when you're trying to brainstorm, your mind is automatically going to answers and maybe false assumptions or biases that are already part of the problem. So how do you get the brain to change gears and put it in a state of curiosity? And so Hal talks about a question burst, and it's very simple. It's 4 minutes. And in that 4 minutes, you try to come up with 20 questions about the challenge. No answers. But humans we are all tapped, and you've all heard this story, as kids, we ask questions all the time, but as we grow up, the expectation is we have all the answers, and it's, you shouldn't have the questions or whatever. So I kick off the ideation part of the hackathon is, okay, now you have the challenge. Let's pause for a minute before we get into solving. Take a minute, 4 minutes, and let's think about questions. Maybe reframe the challenge. Maybe think about the challenge differently. Ask questions. And then as a group, they go around the table and they start to share the questions that they came up with. And oftentimes, there are questions that lead to, oh, wow, I didn't even think of that. So it's interesting, back at EduCon in LA, none of the solutions, to your point, Lindsay, were about wasteful food. I automatically thought that was going to be the low-hanging fruit. None of the teams went there. And I think that is a result of the questions and the curiosity about unsheltered homelessness and where the questions gravitated. It wasn't so much about food, but it was about, how did they get there? How did this happen? How do we prevent it? Anyway, so that question burst, I use it all the time when I'm stuck, is just pause for a minute and just think about the questions you have about the challenge or a struggle. It could be a job related. It could be something at home. It could be anything. Just thinking about if you're in a relationship situation, if you pause for a minute and really put your mind into a curiosity state, it is amazing what that shift can do and where your brain will go.
And do you find that participants, as they're kind of working through that, they aren't defensive about it, maybe because it is the safe space, like you lay down the rules of the game before you play, right? And so you're very
Correct.
clear that it's not about being defensive and asking you, why don't you have the answer?
That's a great point. And I guess one warning I would give to people is to think about, I think this exercise can be, and Hal talks about it also, maybe, I don't want to say dangerous, but leaders can get very defensive fast. So if you're a CEO of an association or you're a leader of a department and you're doing a hackathon, all of a sudden you have all these questions. Well, what's your knee-jerk reaction? Yeah, but we can't do it because all of a sudden you start making excuses and you want to answer. You cannot fall into that trap. You're right. You have to give them the permission. This is the time we have to ask these questions. Now,
that's a lot of vulnerability.
It is, but oftentimes, I can get on my Brene Brown and vulnerability talk if you want me to, but that's really the heart of a hackathon, is in allowing your teams and the people to be vulnerable and ask these questions. Because if the questions aren't asked, guess what? The challenge is not going to get solved.
Exactly. I love it.
But that goes to a whole culture thing. But I think it's important that you have a good grasp on the culture you're working with if you're going to do a hackathon, because like I said at the beginning, there needs to be some vulnerability tied to it, because there could be some things that are said or questions that are asked that need to be asked. So
I think it's interesting too. Something we haven't really talked about is time. You mentioned that you have 4 hours with, the hackathon and roughly, and then you're also giving people, 4 minutes to think of questions, right? It's not, oh, here's a day, think of some questions, come back tomorrow. You're giving them these time restraints that I think help people be more creative. So what are some of the most creative ways you've seen that time crunch kind of help event managers see what could be possible?
Yeah, I wish I had 4 hours for all of them. 4 hours is a gift. PCMA is a gift. So we really have a sprint hackathon. We don't have the 24-48, but I think the abbreviated amount of time and that time compression promotes creative thinking. And I don't know if you've read the book When by Daniel Pink. I love it. But he talks about this example where I guess there were two, he did an experiment, and there were two sets of individuals that were given gift cards. And one set of individuals had a gift card that expired in 30 days, and another set had an expiration date of 3 months or 90 days. Turns out the people that had the shorter expiration time used the gift card more often than those that had a longer time. So when you have, the hackathon, you condense the amount of time and you start to force people to come to a solution. It automatically triggers, I've got to get there faster. So what happens is my brain has got to, okay, we just have to decide. And also sometimes they just get uncomfortable and they're like, whatever, just do it. And sometimes those are the best solutions that come of it, because they're like, whatever, we have to present something.
Done is
so
that perfect, right?
Right. The sprint hackathon I think fosters the creativity and provokes pokes the bear a little bit, I guess.
So you mentioned, absolutely. That answered that perfectly. You mentioned presenting the solution, right? Mm-hmm. So for a lot of people that can be uncomfortable, as you mentioned earlier, the one woman who had to speak in front of a lot of people. With the presentations, are there unique ways that they're presenting them? Are they PowerPoints they have to develop, logos,
I've seen. No, listen, take your digital marketing. Yeah, no. I advocate for a low-tech presentation. We give them a foam board, markers, and picture is 1,000 words, And oftentimes, in these sprint things, you get 60 seconds.
Wow.
Condense it down. You know what? Yes, half the time if you give them more time, the amount of ons and they just go on and on and on, and they're not landing the plane. So 60 seconds, sprint, get to your point, and off you go. And you think about there's a concept in design thinking about the peak end rule. This happens at the end, and they're these fast, rapid presentations. Talk about energy, and they one by one, the teams get up and present, and the solutions are pretty creative for 60 seconds. So I advocate for non-tech markers, get uncomfortable, time, and I cut them off at 60 seconds. Like, time's up. Thanks for playing. Next. There's no. Now, if you have more time and you have the judges and you could do some Q&A, I'm just saying a lot of times event organizers are like, I don't have enough time. We can make it work in 90 minutes if you really want to do it. So take your logo and no, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
What would you say is an ideal group size then? If, and how many groups?
Let me reframe your question.
Oh,
what is the ideal group team size? How's that?
I like it.
So we have found research that conversations of 4 allow organic conversations to happen. And then once you go over 4, you will start to notice conversations start to break off into 2 or 3, or people start to form their own groups. So I like to suggest teams of 5. That way you have got the team of 4, but you have the tie-breaking vote. So team of 5 is ideal. Does it always work that way? No. But when you go over 5, you will see the groups break off, and all of a sudden you've got these 2 different solutions being worked on, and how do you bring the group? Anyway, there's some team dynamics. The largest one I've done was probably 220 participants, and they had teams of 8 to 10. And that worked fairly well. That's the one with students. They had some outside brains coming in. But beautiful chaos. I'm just telling you, if you could wave a magic wand and do groups of 5 or teams of 5, and you really want to make use the scarcity model and say you're going to cut off at 50 participants to drive some of that, that would be my recommendation. FOMO.
So, let's get tactical then, because we're talking about, the ideal team size. So I run an annual event for my membership association. How much does this cost if I'm going to add it into it? What's the work and the resources it takes to pull something like this off? Do I need to bring a facilitator who's been trained in hackathons in? Can I do it myself using your handy dandy hackathon design book? Are there networks?
I would probably, yeah. The cost, the facility. Okay. So first of all, I would probably find a facilitator that is going to also help raise the message that the organizer wants to raise. Maybe there's something there that the organizer doesn't really feel comfortable. The facilitator can do some of that heavy lifting, can ask some of the questions that maybe the groups are thinking that they are afraid to ask the leader or whatever. So if you could find a facilitator to help with that, I would advocate for that. One thing we haven't talked about is, and where the biggest cost comes in, is the potential prize at the end. I like the idea of a carrot at the end. There are some different schools of thought, like, we just want to do this to generate ideas. I think that's great. I do think if the teams are competing for something, that competition is going to fuel some more creativity and spark some new ideas. So having the carrot at the end could be, depending on what you want to do. It doesn't have to be costly, but you asked about cost. It could be cash. Some people think cash is not good.
Well, do you see different prizes like that? Does the cash motivate better? Because from an intrinsic, extrinsic perspective, socks motivate. What?
Right. People think I work for Bombas. I'm just their biggest fan. It could be something as simple as a pair of socks that I use. You share the story about Bombas in there, and I just gave away one of our big surprises in there. But it can be something very simple that you offer to them at the end. I did have a customer that I worked with that they couldn't, because of regulation, they could not have a prize. And I was really struggling with this. But what I found out is human beings like to be just awarded the winner. It was so important for the teams just to have their picture in the show daily the next day, be crowned the winner. That was enough to fuel the competition. But they saw a competition, they just couldn't have a prize. So back to the cost question. I'm also, and I've got to commend PCMA in LA. They gave us a great environment in that restaurant space. So back to people love ballrooms with rounds. I say get in the most unusual space you can possible. Natural light is great, a place for the teams to walk around. Creative thinking happens when you're outside that typical space. So if you can, borrow space from a fellow organization, use pre-function space, block it off. You don't need to have total, complete privacy, but sometimes the environment can be costly. So you want to think about that. And then foam board markers, AV, and off you go. I don't think it's too complicated, but I'm not you. So I'm sure you're dialing up the dollars.
Giving out Teslas over here.
Right.
You have options, because it's especially like you're trying something new. You've actually convinced the leadership you want to do this, and you're like, and it's going to cost $100 million. And so if you can say, we're going to invest a little bit of resources for a lot of reward, because all the rewards you've talked about, I think would be valuable no matter what kind of organization you're working with. That conversation around cost definitely does help grease the wheels a little bit as you're trying to bring in something new that's slightly scary, especially when it's going to raise questions maybe not everyone's ready to answer.
Got it. Low cost, high impact. You got to be ready for those questions. But if you're not, then that's starting back at the very beginning and saying, okay, maybe this, and that's a good conversation to have. A hackathon is not for everyone. It's not for every organization. I've had very transparent conversations after talking to people, and if that comfort level is not there between members and administration or whoever, we're not doing it, because it's going to actually, it could create a bigger problem than what we thought.
Yeah.
So go somewhere else or try something else to solve that.
Go back to the ballroom with your rounds. It'll be fine.
Right. Have a panel discussion, please.
So I guess on that note, what are some best practices to ensure that the hackathon will be successful, and also like what's something you should never do?
Oh gosh, that is a good question. I'm going to go back to a couple things. I think limit the size. While you can do it for 200, I think really limiting to 100 or less, so you can create that intimacy, and the size of the groups to 5 is ideal. Think about this as a sponsorship opportunity. What other place does a organization have to offer a sponsor where they can immerse themselves in the community, be part of the conversation around a solution, and have a seat at the table within the organization? So you talked about cost, Lindsay. A sponsor could pay for the whole thing potentially, and they want this. So think about the sponsorship opportunity. And then students, outside thoughts, mentors, give that some really good, deep conversations internally about who could fill those roles. The naive experts, the wild cards, the mentors, and tap and cast those, there goes my Disney speak, but cast those characters strategically so you have the right people in place.
Right.
And then most importantly, and save the best for last, is make sure you have the right challenge in place and the people care about it. There's nothing worse than somebody walking in to start to try to solve something that they don't care about or they don't understand. So that arm wrestling with the challenge, I didn't realize how important that is. And it could take, I don't want to be dramatic, but it's not just a couple minute conversation. It really takes some good finessing and arm wrestling amongst all the people that are developing it to make sure you have that challenge correct. Words matter.
Something that inside the handbook, or is that like something like as you're starting, like what are some of the questions from a facilitator standpoint? Because even bringing an outside consultant in.
Yeah, that's going to be part of my 2.0 of the handbook, to really talk about challenge creation and making sure that you have the challenge right, both for the organization, but also for the hackers.
Now, is the challenge something that you have ever given the participants beforehand so they can think about it before they get there?
Yep. So PCMA actually put it out almost as a survey. Like, here are the topics we want to, so they crowdsource, we're thinking about doing, and then the hacker signed up and they voted. So there is a chance that somebody could maybe voted for attendance growth, but all of a sudden we're on learning experience design. But they all participate in learning experience design. That's one way. Ultimately, oftentimes the organization wants to do this because they have a challenge in mind. Okay, great. Let's really craft the challenge in a way that's going to spark conversation and get these hackers thinking.
Is it good to keep some things a secret before they get in the room, like twists and
expect the unexpected, like the prize? Sometimes they don't know that there's a prize. Oftentimes that's a big surprise. Yeah, I like the element of surprise. Sometimes they, oftentimes in the event space, if you're not in the tech space, they don't even know what this is. So there's a lot of surprises. They don't know they're going to have to be getting teams. What's this yellow dot mean? Why does he have a pink dot? Well, you're on the yellow team, you're on the pink team, and we're not going to be sitting together anymore. Right? No. So there's a lot of elements, and I've not had anybody say I'm not going to participate in this. They all follow along. I think the prize at the end, the presentations are always a surprise. Like, what do you mean? But it's a very high energy ending, like I mentioned. So some surprises in there, but
and what would you
it's all my design. What would I never do?
What would you say? Don't ever do this.
I think I'm going to go back to if you think the dialogue is not going to be well received and welcomed, and it's going to create more friction than synergy, get away. And so just go through that dialogue of, okay, who's going to be in the room, or back to the vulnerability. If those things are not going to happen and people are uncomfortable with what could be said, then let's not do it. We're not there yet.
Have you ever done something as a facilitator and you're like, let's never do that again?
Knock on wood, no. Thanks. Now that you put that out there, Alex, I'm waiting for it. No, I've been very lucky, but I don't want to say lucky. I think I've been smart in the dialogue that I've had up front. And I know I've some of the pitfalls to watch out for. So the minute I hear some anxiety or conflict, I'm like, okay, time out. Let's talk about this before we get to prime time. And that's worked.
All right. What's the one thing we should have asked you, but we haven't?
Let me look at my list. You talked about vulnerability. You talked about the question burst. You talked about environment, formation, mentors, follow-up. We talked about sponsorship. You guys did really good. Yeah. There's not anything. You guys covered it all.
I've got one.
Ooh, I like it.
All right. How far in advance should someone plan a hackathon?
That's a great
one. How long
one.
does it take to create one?
Oh gosh, we can put one together fairly quickly. I think that's a good question. The time for putting together the challenge, if you want to have the mentors, if you're trying to seek a sponsor, those are some of the things you're going to want to put together. If some of those elements you don't want or don't need, we could put one together fairly quickly. It's not a
like next week fairly quickly, or like the end of the month fairly quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You have to promote it and get people signed up if right. They're wanting to be there. But we did one within 2 months of announcing it, and I was surprised at the traction that they got inside that 2 months. It was 100 signups quickly.
Wow, that is fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then I guess from a perspective of doing it over and over again at the same event. So if you have an annual event and you're doing a hackathon every year, how do you make it fresh? How do you, for people who want to participate more than once?
I think making sure the topic or the challenge is different, making sure your mentors or the subject matter experts are different. And oftentimes events are in different locations. And so the participants, the personalities, the dynamics of the group are going to help create a different experience. And I think PCMA's had a couple people that have participated in multiple, and they have said, due to my team being different, due to the city being different during the challenge, it was very different experiences, but that's why they keep coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a question come in from the audience, Jamie. How can event profs use hackathons to speed up the event planning process internally?
How can event profs use the hackathon to speed up?
So the challenge is we need
How can they hack their own event?
Yeah.
If they've got the buy-in with their team and leadership, I would encourage a mini hackathon, but specifically maybe that question burst, because maybe it's some question, reframing that question, like what is causing all the delays, or why is everybody late to getting their deliverables to you, or whatever. There's got to be some questions within that question that are really causing.
So going back to your challenge point from earlier, it's like, what's the challenge you're trying to solve? And then how can we use the process to help answer
Correct.
and support that challenge?
So is the challenge really, I need to speed up the process, or is the question, who is slowing me down? What is the clog in the wheel? Whatever. But I would recommend the question burst.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, I think, though, because it's not, I mean, like you were saying, hackathons aren't for everything. And so like having a very good understanding of both your strategy for your meetings as well as the processes you use, because we often confuse strategy and execution and the tactics that lie in between and putting that in. And the hackathons can be very valuable, but not if you're not applying it correctly.
But okay, so I'm going to push back on the event prof because that challenge is only really probably affecting who?
The event planner.
Right. Do you think anybody else cares?
I mean, maybe it depends on.
Seriously, though, I hate to say that.
I mean, no, you're absolutely right, but I think
it's going to have a trickle down effect, I'm sure, because things get stressed. There could be turnover. I mean, it creates a chaotic environment. But I think there's probably some other, like I said, questions in there that need to be addressed.
And all of those can be found inside your design thinking, or no, your event hackathon 2.0, right? Like, because of the challenge.
Correct. Coming soon. Yes.
Coming soon.
Yes.
So we always try to close the show with a couple of questions. One is, if you had just kind of high level thinking, one tip for any event planner out there, what would the one tip be?
Say thank you and show gratitude. Seriously, a thank you goes a long way to whoever is helping you along the way. I've learned that from some great leaders along the way, but boy, that thank you along the way and saying high five or this is how your action helped impact our event is so important. And I don't think people do that enough. Good How's one. That for big thinking?
Oh, Mike.
I don't think I've heard that one actually. And you hear a lot of the similar tips. I don't think I've heard say thank you and show gratitude. I like it.
You and the gifting guy, Jamie, you're in good company.
Oh, John Ruhlin and I are like, he's a mentor. He's a good guy. Yeah.
The second question we always ask, and you've already mentioned some of them, so I'm excited to hear what else you've got, is do you have any new cool resources you want to share? Websites, blogs, books, gadgets? Where can people find the Hackathon Design Playbook? You mentioned a few other books.
I am in love right now with, what is it called? I'm looking at my app. I want to make sure I give the right podcast because I just became a master designer in Experient. I'm very excited. Thank you. But have you heard of Adam Grant?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
He's a work psychologist, and he talks about how to make work not suck.
Yeah.
And so I am Work Life, TED, with Adam Grant. That's my new one, introduced by a colleague here at Experient. But going back to why I think I was attracted to the hackathon is the cultures and the work environments that I've been very attracted to. Oh, that's mute. Is those environments that have leaders that welcome the new ideas, the innovation, the disruptive thinking. And Adam does a great job with his research and his interviews. And season 3, I hope, is coming out soon because I've worked my way through all of them. Go Adam Grant. Oh, one other resource I want to plug. peoplescience.merits.com. We have got, you think about the behavior of people, and we plan events because of people. But if you don't understand what motivates people and the behavior of people, why do it? So Charlotte Blank and our behavioral science team is incredible, and there's some great research that they're doing with universities out there so we can better understand people, which is what our attendees and guests are. So the peoplescience.merits.com is a great resource for some good studies. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, we are winding down. I want to thank you, Jamie, for being with us. This was wonderful. I think this is a crash course in hackathons that everyone needs, especially if you've been thinking about it. For those who are watching, for our viewers, how can they get a hold of you? Where can they follow you online?
Probably best place, just find me, Jamie Murdock, on LinkedIn. That would be the best. I'm trying to get my Twitter better, but I think LinkedIn would be the best place. Just drop me a note with what you're looking for, and I'm happy to make some time and connect with you and be a resource. That's great.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you again. For those watching, we record live each Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern at www.event-icons.com. It's the best place to watch us. If you missed the show, it's always available the following Tuesday on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as replay on our website, event-icons.com. And the best place to watch is live. And you can ask us questions and really participate. So we'd love if you can join us every Wednesday at 5 p.m. You can also check out show notes, links to the resources that are shared, and join the chat right there on the page at the website. And we want to know what you think. So contact us on Twitter, Instagram, etc. Let us know your thoughts and who you want to see on the show. Thanks again to everyone who joined us. Thank you, Jamie. And thank you, Lindsay, for co-hosting this wonderful episode. And we will see you next week at 5 p.m. right here on Event Icons.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons. To catch all the bonus content, resources mentioned, and an invite to our Facebook and LinkedIn groups, head to www.event-icons.com. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway. Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.